Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. This is Scott Sambucci, and welcome to the Startup Selling Booking Yourself Solid at Industry Conference webinar. So, super excited to have everybody on the line today. And in particular, I know many of you that are listening in are focused on the upcoming Health 2.0 conference in San Francisco. And so, what I want to do today is really focus in on two kind of main areas during our time. We've got about an hour scheduled. And so there's going to be two things we're going to be focusing on. First, say call it 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. I'm going to run through some principles, some core ideas around which you should be thinking about any industry conference, not just the one coming up, but any of your industry conferences, so that you have some frameworks, you've got some baseline, you've got some ideas, you've got some templates that you can use in terms of thinking about any industry conferences that you might have coming up for yourself and for your company over the course of the next couple of months or even the next couple of years. So that'll be the first part. The second part is we're going to dive into the tactical side of things. So I've got tons of worksheets, frameworks, playbooks, everything you could imagine that I've built out over 20 years in selling. And so what I've done is consolidated a lot of those resources, and I'm going to share those with you and specifically give you some really tactical advice, as well as show you how you can get copies of these resources and these worksheets for yourself, so you can start to put these to work right away for your conference, for your event, for your company. Sound good? Okay, awesome. So just to kind of give you a quick visual. So that's me. I'm the guy on the upper left of the screen. I'm Scott Sambucci. I'm the founder and chief sales geek over at Sales Qualia. And everything that we do here focuses on helping startups and growing companies find customers, grow revenue, and build their sales process. So I like to think about this as part one is prospecting and pipeline. Let's go find you the right future customers and fill your sales pipeline with those prospects. Then we want to convert them into part two, which is convert them into paying customers, right? That's the grow revenue piece. And if we do those two things correctly, if we find the right prospects and get them in your pipeline, if we convert them into paying customers, and we do that enough times, what ends up happening is as a positive byproduct is a sales process. So whether you're a startup or a growing company, or you've got a new product line within your company and you're trying to figure out how do we sell our product in a repeatable, scalable way, those are all of the things that I help companies focus on. Okay, so that's enough about me. Let's dive into the content and let's get rolling. Does that sound good? Awesome. Cool. So conferences, industry events. Why is this important? I want to kind of set the stage for you as to why this is such an important topic for you and for your team, for your sales team, for your startup, for your growing company. Okay. So first of all, it's really frustrating when you get to this industry conference and there can be like literally thousands of people walking around. They're walking in the hallways, they're in the conference hall, they're in the rooms, they're in the vendor area, right? There's thousands and thousands of people, and you know there are prospects everywhere, but you don't know who the right people are. Who should you be talking to? And you're scanning name badges and you're trying to squint and trying to figure out, like, who do I talk to? And nothing is more frustrating than being in the middle of thousands of people you know you could be selling to and not being able to sell your stuff, right? Secondly, another thing that can be really frustrating is there's this opportunity cost. And what I mean by that, there's kind of two different costs, two different opportunity costs. One, of course, is your time, right? So, if you're in some cases traveling across the world, and in other cases, even if you're just traveling across the country, you're spending days and days and days just planning for the conference. Then you get to the conference, and that's time away from the office. It's time away from your routine. It's time away from your other sales prospects, your product development, your engineering, your recruiting, your capital raising, all the things that go with running your team, running your startup. And so when you go to these conferences, there's a huge opportunity cost of that time, those couple of days or that week that you're spending at the conference, not to mention the fact that now when you get back, you've got to catch up with all the things that you missed while you're out of the office. So there's the one cost there, is your time cost. The second cost, of course, is the monetary cost. These conferences ain't cheap, right? They're not inexpensive. If you want to go to a good industry conference where you're going to reach high-level executives, sometimes you're talking about $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for a ticket. Or if you're setting up a booth or you're doing a sponsorship, it's easily in the tens of thousands of dollars, plus the airfare, the hotel, the food, the entertainment, all the other stuff that goes into investing money into making sure that you have a good conference. So it can be really frustrating when you have this opportunity cost of your time and your money, and you want to make sure you're getting not thinking about those investments as cost. You want to be thinking about those investments as a return that you're going to be getting back and the return that we want our sales, right? And thirdly, the other thing can be really frustrating is that there's never seems to be an end to interesting conversations, right? How many times have you gone to an event, you've gone to a conference, and every conversation seems interesting, and you collect 20 business cards, 25 business cards, 50 business cards, and you think to yourself after the conference, you get back to the office, and you've got this stack of cards, and you're looking at the stack of cards, and you're going, wow, I had a lot of interesting conversations. Then you start sorting through the business cards, and you realize, like, gosh, kind of scratch your head, and you go, well, I had a bunch of interesting conversations, but I'm not quite sure I have a lot of sales leads here. Well, what did I do for the last 3 or 4 days? Have you ever been in that situation? I sure have, right? And so what we want to do is avoid these frustrations, right? And I think ultimately the biggest fear that we have is just there's this missed opportunity, right? With the time that you're spending, the money that you're spending, the prospects are everywhere. You're having these conversations with people, and you want to make sure that you're turning those conversations into dollars, right? And I think that's the biggest fear is this missed opportunity. And so what we really want is we want to be able to get to these conferences and really knock them down. We want to have good meetings with the right people, turn those meetings into sales leads, right? We want to create some leverage for ourselves. It's very, very rare, right? That you can go to a place and have hundreds or thousands of people to talk to. Normally you'd have to get on an airplane and fly to different cities, or you'd have to set up individual phone calls and individual web meetings and individual demos with people one at a time, 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 right? So instead, if we can compress the amount of work, the amount of sales conversations we're having into a really, really short period of time with highly qualified people, top executives, that's where we get some really big leverage. And I'm sure that's one thing that you want, right? And of course, we want a full schedule, right? There's nothing more frustrating and there's nothing more challenging than getting to a conference and realizing, man, I've got big gaps in my schedule. Or, wow, I've spent a lot of time sitting in sessions when I should be out talking to people. So what we really want is that full schedule from morning, first thing in the morning, starting breakfast, all the way through the end of the day when we get back to our hotel room that night. We want a full schedule with the right meetings. And ultimately, I think what we're looking for here is building a system, right? As I mentioned at the top of the webinar, one of the things I want to give to you with these frameworks and worksheets is a series as a system that you can use not just for this event coming up for you, also for all of the events, whether it's a huge industry conference, it's a local business association, it's a chamber of conference meeting, it's a meetup group. You want to be able to apply what I'm going to be teaching here in this webinar and think about how you can apply it over and over and over again so that you can start repeating and scaling your sales process, okay? So let me just pause there and see if there's any questions so far. Any questions so far what we've covered? Does all that make sense? Does all that make sense? Getting like lots of yeses, thumbs ups. Yeah, cool. Here's a comment here. The idea of leverage. Yeah, the idea of leverage is a big deal, right? You're getting to this industry conference. You want to get the most out of it while you can. So good. Thank you. Awesome. Well, look, let's get into a couple of these key principles. As I mentioned, we're going to spend about 15, 20 minutes talking about some key principles here. And after we get through the key principles and talk through those, then we're going to shift over to the tactical side of things with your industry conferences, okay? Ready? 5 key principles that we want to go over. Here we go. Number 1, when you think about conferences, give yourself 2 months runway. So the way I think about this is when I see an industry conference that's on the schedule, let's say the industry conference is going to start on November 1st, my work begins at least 2 months ahead of time. So September 1st, I'm giving myself 2 months runway to begin scheduling meetings, figuring out what I want to accomplish, who am I going to meet with, what are the outcomes that I want. You want to give yourself 2 months runway. And there's a couple of reasons why you want to give yourself 2 months runway. First and foremost, the people that you most want to meet with are probably the same people that other people most want to meet with. And depending on how high up the organizational chart you're trying to go, in a lot of cases, the people that you're trying to meet with don't keep their own schedules. And so you might be contacting an executive and they'll say, well, you need to work with my assistant or you need to work with my team in order to schedule some time. I've been at some pretty big industry conferences in the financial industry, and most of the major companies out there, say like Wells Fargo or Capital One or any of these large financial groups, they don't even leave their suite, where they have like a separate meeting room where these senior executives are booked from 8 in the morning until 6 in the afternoon, and it's every 30 minutes, every 30 minutes, every 30 minutes is another meeting, another meeting, another meeting, another meeting, right? They're not walking the hallway. They're not walking and going down to the vendor area. They might be a speaker. They might pop down for a couple of hours to do their speaking thing or their panel, and then they're right back up to do more meetings, right? So you want to get on that schedule. And the way you want to get on that schedule is give yourself 2 months runway. If you wait until a week before the conference, or worse, you waited to get to the conference and say, hey, I saw there's some senior guy from Wells Fargo that's going to be here. Maybe I can go meet with them. Well, that's just not going to get you the meeting that you want. So you want to start giving yourself 2 months runway. So whenever that start date is for your conference, give yourself at least 2 months to start working through the attendee list, the speaker list, working with the meeting organizers, everybody else that's going to help you fill your meeting scorecard. You want to book yourself solid here. Okay. So that's principle number 1. Principle number 2 is add value. And what I mean by that is when you are setting up your meetings, while of course you want to sell your product, you want to talk about your company, you want to talk about your solution, you want to talk about you, consider the fact that if you're talking to a highly qualified senior executive on the other side, that meeting can't be about you. That meeting has to be about them. So what I want you to do is think about ways, as you are establishing your meetings and you're making your outreaches, I want you to think about how you can add value to the other side of the table. And so I know a lot of companies really struggle with this, because you might be sitting there thinking, well, I'm just some startup, or I'm just I've got the sales role, and what can I possibly offer to somebody who's a senior executive in, in a major healthcare company like United Healthcare or Aetna or Blue Cross or something like that. Well, how could I possibly add value to somebody like that? So let me give you a little bit of confidence here. When you started your company, when you've got your startup, when you've got your product, the chances are that you started your company and you built your product, and your product exists because you're out there to solve a problem that either nobody else has solved, it's being solved really poorly with things like manual systems or old, antiquated, outdated products, or you just do a much better job of solving that problem. And what that gives you is a really unique perspective on the problems that the executives and the companies that are dealing with each and every day. So what I want you to be thinking about is, how can you add value by offering new perspectives to those senior executives? A lot of these people are sitting there and they're stuck inside their organizations. Just like at the meeting, they're booked all day in conferences. Well, a lot of times when they walk into that office every single day, they're handed a schedule and say, you've got these 7 meetings today. They don't get a chance to get out and talk to new people and get fresh ideas. But the thing is, that's their job as a senior executive, as the kind of person, the influencer that you want to be meeting with at these conferences. Their job is to go bring in new ideas and bring in new perspectives and build strategies and help solve problems within their own company. And so it's incumbent on you as a startup to offer them that perspective that you might have. So as an example, when you're doing an outreach, and an email outreach that you might do, and I'll show you an example in just a little while when we get to the tactical side, but just off the top of my head, if I'm sitting there and saying, look, I've got this unique software platform for the healthcare industry that's designed for hospitals, and I see a senior executive that is, let's say, a senior vice president of operations at a major hospital, then one of the things I might do to add value to that person is say, hey, pretend the person's name is John. Hey, John, this is Scott over at XYZ Software. I founded our company because I noticed in the hospital industry that there is a huge gap or a huge problem that was not being solved around, and then explain the problem. And so I am coming to this industry conference to talk with other executives like you, because I want to share my perspectives on how this problem can be solved and understand how this problem is affecting companies like you. Could we grab 15 minutes at the conference next month? Right? So when you're bringing perspectives, you're bringing ideas, that person on the other side is going, oh, finally, somebody with fresh perspectives, not a bunch of people that work for me or work under me that are telling me the same things over and over. I mean, these people are going to conferences to learn, to contribute, to be part of the industry, to see what else is going on out there. So when you can tell them like, hey, I might be one of those people that can give you that perspective, that's an easy way to add value. So that's just one simple way. Another example might be, if you have built any kind of content selling piece, let's say you've built a webinar that you've recorded, or you've done a white paper that you've published, or even a series of very in-depth blog posts, then that's something else that you can bring with you. Think of it as having it in your pocket as a way to add value to those meetings. So you might approach that same senior executive and say, hey, John, I saw that you're the Senior Vice President of Operations at XYZ Hospital. We're coming to this conference next month, and I saw you're going to be there. One of our major objectives at this conference is to share the results of our white paper study on blah, blah, blah. And so I thought you might be interested in hearing about those results. Could we sit down for 15 minutes so I could share the white paper and the research that we did around XYZ problem? Now, if I'm John on the other side, I'm going, I'm listening. I want to hear this. I got 15 minutes for somebody that's gone out of their way to do some research and they want to share results with me, right? So these are ways you can be thinking about how you can add value. So don't sit there and say, oh, I'm just some startup and I'm just hoping to get some meeting, and gosh, if I get 15 minutes, the first thing I want to do is demo my product. No. That's not how you approach these meetings. The way you want to approach these meetings are, how can you provide your perspective, your ideas, your research, anything that's valuable to the other side, because that is what will get you the meetings that you want. Not, hey, John, I saw the SVP of operations over at XYZ Hospital. We built this new product. Can we set up a demo at the conference? John's not even going to answer that email. Okay? So that's what I mean by add value. Make sense? Cool? Got it? Okay, let's move on. So number 3, and so now as you're getting into your meetings, what I want you to do for each and every meeting, I want you to be thinking about an advance. And what I mean by an advance is, prior to that meeting, there's some kind of objective that you would like to achieve as part of that meeting. And a lot of times at conferences, it can be really dangerous. And this goes back to the idea of interesting conversations, where you might sit with somebody, you talk to them 15, 20, 30 minutes, and they go, wow, Scott, really good to meet you. Thanks so much. Let's keep in touch. Here's my card. Well, okay, I had a good meeting. I met somebody new, but what was I missing? I was missing an advance. There was no outcome there. There's no discernible next step in the sales process. So instead, what I want to be doing here is thinking about, okay, if I have the opportunity to meet with a specific person, or a person that is in my target customer base, then for those each and every meeting, I want to be thinking about what's the outcome that will advance me to the next step in the sale. So when somebody says to me, hey, Scott, thanks so much for meeting. Really good to meet you. Here's my card. Let's keep in touch. Instead of going, oh, yeah, great. Thanks. I'll send you an email. Let's connect on LinkedIn. No. Instead, what I'm going to do is go, you know what? You're right. It has been really good to meet. And, we've talked about a couple of really important issues affecting your company and how our product, our solution might be able to help you solve that problem. So what I would suggest for a next step would be to schedule a time with 2 or 3 other people in your organization, on your team, to get their perspectives on this problem. When could I set up that meeting with those people after this conference? Or who else in your organization should I be talking to? Now I've got a really specific next step. Now I've advanced the sale because I've got a specific next step. I'm asking for a contact for new people. I'm finding out if this person really, really is interested in continuing the conversation or not. Are they just being nice and saying, here's my card, keep in touch? Or are they saying, oh, you know what, you're right. Let me get you in touch with Mary because she runs our facilities management team. Let me get you in touch with Susan because she's the head of information technology for my group. And let's have you talk with them, and then we can set up a schedule a demo from there. So that's what I mean by thinking about it in advance. You always want to make sure each and every meeting, you walk out of that meeting with a specific next step. Okay? So always think advance for each and every one of your meetings. So what I'm going to do is just pause here. That's the first 3 principles. I want to see what questions you guys might have. So in the question box, just go ahead with a capital Q. what are some of the questions that you have when you are thinking about a couple of these key principles? Anything that's come up that hasn't been clear so far? Anything that hasn't been clear so far? Give you a second to type in there. Yeah, so that's a good comment here. So not necessarily a question, but here's a good comment. This idea of adding value. Yeah, I mean, so the question here is that you hadn't thought about sales meetings in such a way, right? We call them sales meetings, right? So by virtue of that alone, we're thinking about like, how do I sell my stuff? Well, don't think about selling your stuff. Turn it around. Think about that person and their problem and how you can help them think about their problem in a new way, or help them achieve a new perspective, or offer that perspective that you had. Don't worry about your product. Focus on the customer and their problem first. And once you have a clear understanding of their problem, once you've been able to create an intellectual connection with that person and with their problem, then the sale part will be much, much easier. Because once you've shown to that person that you understand their problem and that you have potentially a solution for that, they will be the ones that will want to walk into the sales process with you. You won't have to ask them. They'll say, wow, Scott, I really appreciate you sharing the results of these white papers. So tell me a little bit more about what you guys do. Oh, sure. Happy to tell you. So, one of the things we do is we focus on, obviously we focus on solving this problem for companies like yours. We built a product that does these three things. Typically what we like to do is schedule a short demo with people like you and people on your team so that you can see how it works and understand a little bit more about how that might fit into your organization. How do we do that, right? So it completely flips the sale, air quotes, the sale around. Instead of you having to sell, they will be asking how to buy, or at least interested and investigating on how to buy. So yeah, really good point there. Thanks for bringing that up. Cool. Well, let's hop over to the last two principles. Let's wrap up this first section, and then we'll get into the highly tactical side of things. So principle number 4 is sell the meeting. Sell the meeting. And what do I mean by sell the meeting? What I mean by that is the only thing you want to do, the only focus of getting to this conference and grabbing these meetings, setting up these meetings, is getting the meeting, right? Once you're in the meeting, then you can start having conversations. You can start talking about problems. You can start giving your perspectives, right? One of the traps that I see happens all the time, and this will even happen to me. People will reach out to me because they'll see I'm at an industry conference and they want to try to talk to me or sell me stuff. They'll say, hey, Scott, our company does blah, 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 and our product does these things. And oh, by the way, you can click here to see a demo online and a video, blah, 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 blah. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be at the conference. Can I meet with you? Like, man, you're just like, it almost feels like, pardon the graphic description here, but it feels like somebody's just vomiting on me. They're just puking on me, right? They're trying to sell their product and they haven't even gotten the meeting first. So what I mean by sell the meeting, just focus on getting the meeting. Once you get in the meeting, then you can start having the conversations around the customer's problem, their situation, understanding their needs, and then the sale can come down the road. So don't try to sell your stuff. Don't try to sell your product. Don't try to sell your solution. Don't try to offer a demo when you're out doing the outreach to set up the meeting at the conference. Just get the meeting first. And that's why the ideas of adding value, right, and thinking about the advance are so critical to selling those meetings. So just focus on who are the people that I want to be talking to that are in my target market, that I believe are the right stakeholders, the right influencers, the right decision makers in those companies. Let me just focus on getting those meetings. And from there, I can focus then on steps number 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, 15 that it might take to get from that initial introduction to a sale. So just sell the meeting. And it's a really critical part of setting up your conference meetings and your event meetings, okay? So last principle that I want to share here is to assign dollar values, or depending on where you are in the world, maybe it's krones or kronas or euros or yen or whatever your currency is. What I want you to do when you're setting up these meetings is assigning dollar values to those meetings. And what this will do is force you to avoid the interesting conversation and instead just focus on what are the sales outcomes here. Now, those dollar values could be assigned based on, hey, there's a sales opportunity here. Maybe it's a partner that we might work with. Maybe it's a channel distribution company that might also sell our company, our products. Maybe it's an investor. Maybe you're going to the conference to find an investor for your company. Whatever the reason is that you're meeting that person, what I want you to do is assign a dollar value to it. And this is going to force you to make sure that you're setting up the right meetings with the right people. There's no shortage of interesting conversations like we talked about. So instead, if you're setting up a meeting, you're saying, wow, okay, I've set up 10 meetings for myself over 2 days' time, and the average meeting is worth $50,000 to my company, either by sale or by investment or by channel partnership. Now, basically, if I've got 10 meetings averaging $50,000, now I've got $500,000 worth of meetings that are sitting there in front of me. That's going to help you stay focused. It's going to make sure, if you know that, hey, I'm sitting in front of somebody that might mean $50,000 or even more to my company, well, I'm pretty sure you're going to be focused on an advance, not, hey, thanks for giving me your card. I'll make sure to follow up with you in a couple of weeks. If you know that this person in front of you might be worth $50,000, I think you're going to have a lot more focus in making sure that you get the outcome in the advance that you want to have, that you need to have as part of that conference meeting. So assigning dollar values is really, really critical. And the other thing it does for you internally, it does a couple of other nice things. One is that you can share it with your team. So depending on how big your team is or how big your organization is, if you can turn around to your team of engineers or team of product people and say, hey, we're going to go as a company, we're going to go invest $20,000 in terms of sponsorships and travel and hotel and food. We're going to invest $20,000 of our money or our investors' money in going to this conference. And as a result of investing that $20,000, we've set up 10 meetings that are worth $500,000, or maybe 10 meetings that are $100,000 each worth $1 million. So we are expecting, while of course not every single meeting is going to lead to a sale, we now have some metrics for ourselves as to what the return on investment needs to be for us. If we're going to go spend that $20,000, let's make sure that we've got $1 million worth of meetings. Maybe that's a minimum threshold for you. As you start building out a sales organization for your company, for your startup, as you start growing salespeople as part of your team, you can say, hey, salespeople love to go to conferences. I love to go to conferences. It's great. But if you want to hold those people accountable, so when you say to that salesperson, okay, look, you want to go to that conference? That's great. It's going to cost the company $3,000 for you to get a registration pass. It's going to cost us $1,000 for airfare. We're going to spend another $1,000 in hotel. You're probably going to spend a couple $100 in food, and you're going to be out of the office for 3 days, right? So we're going to spend $6,000, $7,000 in cash, plus you're going to be out of the office for 3 days. Show me your meetings. Show me the dollar values of the meetings that you're having. Because I don't want a salesperson that's going to go to a meeting and just kind of hang out in the lobby and hope they bump into somebody. If I'm going to go invest that kind of money in that salesperson traveling, or I'm going to invest that kind of money in my startup, my investors' money, that they, as a company, I'm going to take that investor money and go to this conference. I want to make sure as heck that I'm getting that return on investment. So it's very empowering when you can start to look at that return on investment. And then finally, what it allows you to do is start to measure your throughput of those meetings. So let's say you spend the $20,000 as a team, as a company to go to that event. You have a prospective $1 million worth of meetings. Well, okay, let's take a look a month from now. How many of those 10 meetings worth $100,000 each led to legitimate sales opportunities in the pipeline right now, a month later, 2 months later, right? And then let's go look 3, 6, 9, even 12 months down the road and say, okay, we did this event last year. Let's look 6 months from now. Have we closed any deals? Did we get any deals closed as a result of going to those conferences? Yes or no, right? So what this allows you to do is give some very specific metrics around whether or not you should be going to that conference again. Because a lot of times we might go to that industry conference. We think we need to go to the industry conference. Everybody's going to be there. And we set up these meetings and we think we have $1 million worth of meetings and opportunities in front of us. But then a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months down the road, we look back and we go, okay, we went to this conference. We spent $20,000. We had, 10 different meetings. we thought were worth $100,000 each, but now here we are 6 months down the road and we haven't gotten a single sale. And we don't even have any real deals in the pipeline as a result of going to that conference. Well, don't go to that conference or go back and look at who the people that you met with are and figure out what you did wrong, right? You've got to think critically about these conferences and events. And that's why this is such, I mean, if anything, this is probably the one thing that will drive the rest of your behavior when it comes to conferences and events. If you are doing this thing, then you will be sure to set the meetings with the right people. You'll be sure that those people will be wanting to listen to you. You'll be sure to have advances, and you'll be sure to be setting those meetings a couple months ahead of time if you know that you are accountable for the behavior and for the actions that you're taking around that conference and event. So those are the 5 key principles that I wanted to share as it relates to conferences and events, setting up meetings, right? So just to quickly recap, and then we'll shift over to the tactical side of things. So the 5 key principles: 1, you want to give yourself 2 months runway. If that conference starts on November 1st, you want to give yourself at least 2 months to start setting up meetings, figuring out who's going to be there, who are the speakers, all of those things. 2 months runway. Secondly, when you're setting up meetings and you're approaching the people that you want to talk to, take the perspective of how can I add value? How will this meeting be valuable to the person on the other side of the table? It's not about you, it's about them, right? Thirdly, when you have those meetings, you want to think about what is the outcome, what is the advance that will bring you one step closer to the sale. Now, understanding this might be the very first time you're meeting with somebody, you cannot expect to close a deal at a conference after a 15-minute introductory meeting. However, you should have a really clear path of what the next step is that will bring you closer, whether it's step 2, 5, 10, 15, 20 down the road, okay? So think advance for those meetings. 4, when you're setting up these meetings, just focus on getting the meeting first. Sell the meeting, sell the value that you're going to bring, sell why that person should be meeting with you. And once you get in front of them, then you can focus on the next step in the sales process. And finally, as we just talked about, you want to assign dollar values, some kind of monetary value to each of those meetings so that you can hold yourself accountable for those meetings, the ones you're setting up. You can hold your team accountable for any other conferences, any other events they might be going to. And most of all, so that you can have some metrics so you can go back and say, we spent this money on conferences. Did we get the output that we expected? If we did, great. If not, then let's go back and revisit whether or not we should go to that industry conference, or should we think about shifting our strategy or our priorities around that. Okay, so those are the 5 key principles that I wanted to share with you right now. We're going to shift over to the tactical side of things in just a second. And before I do that, I just want to just pause here again to see what questions or comments you might have. So if you don't have a question, then one of the things I'd love to hear from you is, based on what we've covered so far, what has been most valuable to you? Has there been a specific key principle or an insight here that I've shared with you? Is there a particular frustration or fear that you can identify with? What's been most valuable so far? So in the question box, in the chat box that you see there, go ahead and type in, tell me what's been most useful and most valuable. Give you a second to write that in. And while you do that, I'm going to take a little drink of water here. Hold on a sec. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Great comment here. So assigning dollar values. So Crystal just wrote in here that she had never thought about assigning dollar values to meetings before. Yeah. This is something I'll tell you, it took me a long time to figure this one out, because I am really good at going to conferences. I'm really good at talking to people, very comfortable in a room. I feel like I can, I have this kind of like, it's a little bit dangerous sometimes, where I feel like I can just wing it, as you say. Like I'll get there and kind of figure it out as I go, or I'll just go to the sessions, and then after the sessions, I'll go talk to some of the speakers, introduce myself, and get a meeting after the conference somehow, some way, right? But that, frankly, that just wasn't a good strategy. And so over time, I've learned that when I assign dollar values, it even helps me figure out if I should even go to a conference that I've thought about going to. So, I might sign up for an industry conference, and thinking like, man, this could be a great event. It seems like the kind of people that I would want to meet with. And if I give myself 2 months runway, let's say I spend $2,000 to go to that industry conference, I get that I pay that registration, and I get the attendee list, and I start, setting up meetings for myself. And as I'm doing those meeting outreaches, if I give myself 2 months runway, well, a lot of times it can be pretty obvious early on that either I'm not getting a response, or the people that I want to meet with are not interested, or it turns out they're not going, or any other information that I can get that might tell me like, it looked like I should be going to this industry conference, but gosh, I mean, I'm just not getting enough meetings to justify the expense of going, right? So before I booked my plane ticket, before I've paid for any hotel rooms, I spent the $2,000 on the registration, but here I am 4, 6 weeks away from the conference, and I've only got 2 meetings, and those 2 meetings are only worth $40,000 to me. Maybe I shouldn't be going in the first place. And most conferences, they'll have some kind of cancellation policy where even if you can't get 100% back of your registration fee, a lot of times you can get 50% back, 75% back based on, how close to the event that you've decided you're not going to go. So, it's sometimes, let's say I'm 4 weeks out and I spent the $2,000 on the registration fee, and I've realized I'm not getting the meetings, and they go, look, we can refund you 75% of your registration fee. So, okay, I'm out the $500 that I spent on the registration. They're going to give me back $1,500 of the 2,000. I'm out $500, but gosh, I've saved myself a ton of airfare, hotel, and most of all, opportunity cost of my time, that I'm not going to just go to this meeting, go to this conference and hope that things work out. Instead, I can say, you know what? It's basically $500. Okay, I've lost $500, but it's a heck of a lot better than spending $5,000 and not having the meetings that I'm going to need to have, right? So this is the kind of ways you need to be thinking logically around this. And so I really appreciate that you wrote in there that this is a big thought for you, this idea of assigning values to your meetings. So, okay, great. So now what? What do we do next? Well, what we're going to do next is shift over to the tactical side. Now, I've given you the core principles under which to be thinking about your events, thinking about your conferences. What we're going to do is shift over to the tactical side, and I'm going to share with you some specific examples of emails, outreaches that I've done, both emails and in-mails on LinkedIn. We're going to talk a lot about using LinkedIn, talk about how to use attendee lists and how to sort through attendee lists to find the people that you want to meet with. And then I've got a couple of worksheets and playbooks that I want to share with you as well. So let's take a break right here. I'm going to shift over to another presentation. So hang on tight. So that's kind of the end of part one, if you will, covering these key principles. And now we're going to go into part two and give you the tactical advances, the tactical advice and strategies that you need in order to make the Health 2.0 conference and all your other future conferences super, super successful. Okay. So that's it for right now. And then just hang tight, and then we'll shift over to part two. Thanks.